Hello everybody, I am Carlos Galvez for aetuts.com. This is my first tutorial, and what we are going to do is that kind of explosive text growing up in 3D very fashion nowadays in ads, something like that. Well, most of motion graphers know that you can do something similar with 3D Studio Max. I think they call it love text, but from my point of view, we'll make it easier by using a couple of simple effects in Cinema 4D and importing these few days with Alpha Channel to After Effects. First of all, I strongly recommend reading a great tutorial about integration between Cinema 4D and After Effects hosted in aetuts.com. But anyway, I explain step by step how exactly to render the files, so it won't be hard stuff. Okay, so let's start by opening Cinema 4D. We create a cube, we make it editable, and then we select Use Polygon Tool. That way. Now Structure and Knife. And what we are going to do with this tool is to split up our box. That's my favorite part of the tutorial. When we'll get a side really broken, we'll rotate our camera and we'll do the same with the other sides. Well, the reason why we are making so many little bits is because we are going to add an explosion effect. Invent object. That way we can see the chips we made exploding up by modulating the object time. So we create now a keyframe in frame 30 with an object time value down to 0. And then we go to frame 100 and turn it to 100. We need also to modify some properties. First of all, we turn gravity off. Rotation is a very cool effect as soon as you can let the particles rotating ecstatic in the space. So we turn variation to 100 and speed to 90. Now we are going to create a new material for our cube. This part is up to you, but I like a much contrasted material. With the reflection up to 100 and specular light. Now turn off the layer by clicking on the upper dot till you turn it red. And let's create the letters that will grow up. You can do it with any element. I mean, you can write a text with Cinema 4D text tool or whatever you want. But I'm going to merge an Illustrator path. Do that with your logo or the name of a product, etc. We have to apply a zip NURBS, but before we do that, we have to connect all the Illustrator paths. Okay, now we create an arc. That's gonna be the curve that will create the text while moving. So you can modify that shape, but we'll let it just like that. Now sweep NURBS, and we add the arc, and then the path. We turn off banking. Now we rotate it to read it in the straight way. And make the art bigger. Now change the rotation value, but you'll see the curve is too polygonal. So apply a hypernurse. You see? Now that's smoother. Now activate again the cube layer and move the growing text more or less to the middle. And let's go to the timeline, and when it begins to blow up, we turn the start growth to 100, and when it has finished, to 0. Now add a cool texture. We'll use a purple color. A little reflection and a specular light. Add a light with a soft shadows. And then we create another instance for our light. Okay, that's almost finished. We just need a cool camera traveling. So now create a camera, keyframe the ending position and then the beginning. Let's go now to render settings, anti-aliasing best, output all frames, HDTV, save TIFF sequence, alpha channel for After Effects and 3D data. And now we go to effects. If you want a lens blur effect, this is the moment for creating it, but in that case I think it's not necessary. What we are going to use is an object motion blur effect. Right click on the object we want to blur and Cinema 4D tags motion blur. We add this to the box and to the text. The problem with that motion blur effect is that if we render it with the render active view, we won't see the motion effect. So we have to use the picture viewer. Now is everything ready. Let's render. Now let's import our footage to After Effects, but before we need to go to the Cinema 4D folder and find Exchange plugin folder. Open After Effects folder in it, and then copy the folder to your After Effects plugin directory. Now you can open After Effects and import the project that Cinema 4D has generated. And here we've got it. we see the straight alpha channel, so let's create a background. Now we generate a ramp effect. We turn it to circular. And we change the colors. Now it's particular time. Create a solid. Add trapcode particular effect. Turn the emitter to box and move it till you can see it. Make the emitter size smaller and change the color of the particle. Now what we are going to do is not to change the particle values by several keyframes in it, but create a null object that's going to modulate the whole particle system. So new null object, and now add a slider control effect to this layer. Keyframe it with a high value in the exact moment of the explosion, and then turn it down. We turn particles per second and velocity down to 0, and alt-click on the clock. Bring the line to the slider effect. Well, multiply the velocity code to 10. And now let's add an out of focus effect to our particles. So lens blur. Turn it to pentagon in order to make it faster, and turn the iris radio to 100. Turn the specular brightness up and turn the specular threshold down till you get something like that. Now duplicate the particle layer and let's create another particle system. In that case, multiply the velocity to 30 in order to make it faster and divide the particles per second by 5. Now go to particle and turn the color random up to 30. Now add a curves effect and turn up the alpha channel. And duplicate again this particle layer, change its color to orange and the size to 1. Then multiply the velocity to 6 and the particles per second to 30. And that's almost done now. This is pretty cool, but we need to add some more realistic explosion effect. So let's use the same slider layer to wiggle it. There are some effects to do something like that, like shake, but we'll do it manually. Alt-click in the position clock of our image sequence and write wiggle, open parenthesis, 10, close parenthesis, and inside of it, link it to the slider. Now add motion blur to this layer. And now divide it up into 2. And finally, the last step, add an edges layer, add color correction curves, and turn it down and play with it to do a burn film color effect. Now just add a cool sound and you have a very cool effect for advertising and motion graphics like opening credits for TV or whatever you want. Well, I hope you enjoyed my first tutorial and you learned something useful. And remember that After Effects like Cinema 4D and other programs are just tools, and without your creativity it means nothing. Carlos Galvez for aetuts.com. See you on next tutorial.